This is the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics. Let's listen to host Chris Saxman explore the personalities and policies that connect the Commonwealth. The VIP Podcast is brought to you by the VCTA, Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. The views and opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the VCTA and Virginia Free or our sponsors.
This is Chris Saxman with the VIP Podcast, a collaboration of the VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Free after serving 8 years in the General Assembly of the House of Delegates with this gentleman, former Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, Brian Moran. Great to see you.
It's great to be with you, and viewers can see I'm now no longer Secretary, and I can wear a sweater and no tie and not all dressed up and be casual, and there certainly is a bit of a sigh of relief. It was 8 years.
Yeah.
13 years in the legislature.
So 21 years of public service,
21
direct public
years,
service.
yeah, right here in the Capitol. But I still love the action, Chris, as you do. I know you're continuing to stay very much involved.
Yeah.
And I do as well. In what capacity, I'm not sure, but I love the action. I love policy making. And I certainly enjoy the city of Richmond as well.
And you seem a little lighter now that you're no longer Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. That's a pretty serious gig, if you will. And when the clock struck noon on January 15th and you turned the reins over to the new administration, how'd that feel?
It felt great.
Was it a
the
relief?
new administration? I like Bob Mosier, Secretary Mosier, Sheriff Mosier. We came to know each other while he was sheriff and I was secretary. I know I went to Fauquier a couple of times. He was active in trying to address opioids. So I was aware of him, having worked with him, and then transition-wise, I have a great deal of respect for him. But I'll tell you, Department of Emergency Management, that last week, in fact, we had a couple of storms.
Yeah.
And right up until the last minute, we had an emergency declaration.
Yeah.
They told me, over the last 4 years, and of course I've served in this job 8, but 4 years, we have averaged an emergency declaration once every 30 to 60 days.
On weather?
Well, no, total. So you're talking COVID, flooding, weather, hurricane prep, preparation. The protests of the summer of 20, we were in emergency declarations right here in the city of Richmond. The mayor asked the governor to declare a state of emergency, and the governor did, and that mobilizes a number of things, particularly the National Guard. So yeah, I mean, it feels as though the last 4 years we were in pretty much a state of emergency. Certainly, the last 2 with COVID.
Right.
And COVID obviously impacts society as a whole. Every one of us is concerned about it, but particularly with my agencies at the time were Department of Corrections. We have 41 facilities where folks are obviously confined in small places, and so that was always a constant concern, and we had to be vigilant to make sure we ensure their safety as well as all of our employees, our correctional officers who were going to those prisons every day. They didn't have a lockdown. They didn't get to work from home,
right,
like a lot of folks did. They were going in every day. So same with our state police and all of our law enforcement. I could not be more proud of those who men and women who wear the uniform. First responders, there was no lockdown for them. They were going out each and every day to work and save lives, literally save lives. So yeah, I mean the last 2 years in particular around those issues. It was a constant concern, and great agency heads. Harold Clark over at the Department of Corrections does a great job. Certainly Colonel Settle at State Police and others, they've stayed on, and I congratulate Governor Youngkin recognizing their talent, their skills. Good to keep them on. They're wonderful.
Well, public safety is the essence of government, isn't it? It's what the whole system is designed to do, is to keep people safe from each other. And also in times of emergency to really make sure that the world is safe. I mean, it doesn't get much better. I mean, sort of from a role perspective, from someone who spent his life as a prosecutor and in the General Assembly, working on all these bills and all these issues relative to the law and how we relate to each other, and to actually oversee it, it's a pretty big job.
Yeah, that's why I'm relaxed. More relaxed now. It was.
I mean, describe
And it was
that.
24/7.
Was it a great release? Was it just like, oh, you'd look at Karen and go, oh my God, we're finally through
It
this?
was 20. Well, she probably more than me even. She was thrilled when it finally came to it.
Right. Well, thank you.
But
for
I
your
took the
service.
job at Governor McAuliffe, and we really had. I mean, it was just excitement and pride, and I mean, what an opportunity to work with our public safety officials throughout the state. But and it really isn't partisan. I really attempted to operate in a nonpartisan way because public safety is not a partisan issue, and you can sort of see that with Governor Youngkin appointing most of the agency heads. I think out of the 11 agencies, only a couple of agencies changed. Obviously, the parole board. But only a couple of agencies changed, and I think that goes to show operationally,
Right.
we were doing very well
Right.
in a nonpartisan way. I mean, obviously the policies of the Northam administration are very different when it comes to criminal justice and some of those issues with the Youngkin administration, and so, but operationally, I could not be more proud of what we were able to accomplish over the last 8 years. We faced any number of crises, and I think we did extremely well, and that's reflective of all those agency heads staying on.
You've been through the ringer. You've been through the Charlottesville.
Well, I
Yeah.
recall going on your show,
Yeah.
Chris, the morning after that, still trying to recall
Right.
the details, and I mean that will forever have an impact on my life.
Well, it changed the course of American history, didn't it? Because Joe Biden said that was the impetus for why he ran for president in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a historic moment, and when you're in that historic moment, do you feel it? And because you don't understand sometimes because you're doing your job that history is taking place on a scale that it's difficult to comprehend. Or have you been able to wrap your head around it to this date?
I'm still wrapping my head around it, but even being there and seeing it, I knew this was extremely unusual and historic. The Friday night when hordes of individuals stormed the Thomas Jefferson Monument at the Rotunda and faced off with UVA students. I mean, that was torches being thrown up in the air and the lack of police presence, and then they showed up, and that was.
Was the lack of police presence one of the reasons they were able to gather and have such a large show?
It was, well, a lot has been said about that, so I'm not going to get into all that. But they were walking on the campus in a trail of folks holding onto the tiki torches, and then they assembled, and the UVA students they didn't want any part of it. So there was literally a physical altercation, and observing that. And then the next day, I started at, 6:30 in the morning, visiting with the state troopers. Governor McAuliffe ordered in 700 state troopers. We threw the kitchen sink in terms of preparations from the state perspective, and the National Guard, and yeah, that'll forever have an imprint on my life and my thoughts. But yeah, that was an impetus for a lot of things. I mean, it still garners attention, and a lot of folks are comparing, what happened on January 6th and up at the United States Capitol. But let me talk the positive. And now I'm no longer secretary. I want to look at things positively.
I know you're going to lay out all the laundry here, but what do you want to share with the audience?
Well, when the call came in for help, and Colonel Settle called me and said, we had been in communication, and he said they want the state police. I said, go.
Right.
Absolutely go. And then, of course, I called the governor, and he was of the same mind. Yeah, send in the state
Who
police.
had to make that call on the ground? City of Charlottesville?
Well, no, I'm talking about January 6th now.
Oh, January 6th.
Okay. January 6th.
I missed the transition there altogether.
Oh, yeah, we could talk about Charlottesville and a whole...
Let's come back
to
January 6th.
No, I'm talking about January 6th in terms of, there are some similarities in how they something we'd never seen before.
Right.
Unprecedented.
Right.
Attack on the United States Capitol. And in the state police, though, and we, the call came in, that came in from D.C.
Right.
Metro Police, and said we need.
Metro. Describe how it goes. Metro Police Chief calls the governor.
No, they had been in communication with the state police, and the state police.
Okay. Then calls you. And
Grace,
says,
thankfully and smartly had assembled troopers in Northern Virginia.
ahead of time.
Ahead of time. They had mobilized just in case, ready in case things went south.
Were you aware of that was going on, obviously?
Yes.
And how long ahead of time was that taking place? Because to marshal up that level of force doesn't happen.
Yeah, but
in
that was just, I think that was just days. I mean, that they.
But there was
they put them there for at
Okay.
least a 24-hour period of time.
from all over the state.
The
700
I think
troopers.
they did. Yeah. No. 700 was Charlottesville.
Okay.
We had about, I think it was closer to 200 for
Still.
January 6th. Yeah. No, we had to move, and that's something the state police does. I mean, they had, unfortunately has had a lot of practice. Not only just Charlottesville, but the protests of 2020. They had to mobilize during that summer.
It takes those troopers off the roads
yeah.
all over the state.
Yeah.
That makes that less safe. So
Yeah.
the impact is not just up in D.C. and making sure
No.
or in Charlottesville
No,
making
they
sure
say,
it goes well
81 and
Yeah.
64,
And
what
that's
they
people
do in the
driving
patrolling.
faster,
So,
gets less safe.
but they were needed.
Okay.
And so they were ready. And when the call came in to Colonel Settle, I approved it, the governor approved it. And to watch those state trooper vehicles, cross over to the Memorial Bridge, what a proud, you could see them coming in. And there's a wonderful video that the state police have assembled. And literally, when you watch those, the film of that day, and you can see law enforcement at one of the porticos holding off. I mean, there were some folks who were using real weapons
Right.
to gain access, and they stopped them. And those were our Virginia State Police troopers.
Really?
They were there. They were right on the front lines. Right on the front lines. They came to the rescue. They were the cavalry. And
I don't think that's been widely distributed. That's what happened.
they were
The
the
state
cavalry.
police in Virginia did that.
Well, obviously the D.C. police were there. They had the Metro Police. They had locals.
How does that
but the state-
authority work legally? I mean, because they're
Oh, we
on
have mutual.
federal.
We have compacts with.
You do.
Oh yeah. We have mutual compacts that we can come to their aid and vice versa.
Okay.
And particularly in Northern Virginia, there's a lot of that.
And how
communication.
operationally?
The inauguration happened shortly after that,
Right.
and we had a lot of
Operationally,
calls.
who's in charge? Who makes the call, and how are they communicating with each other? Because things can get lost in the fog of war.
Right. Well,
Not to compare
you saw
to
that.
others.
Let's go 9/11. You
Sure.
saw that. Who was in charge at the Pentagon, and,
Right.
it's in Arlington. It's actually in Virginia, though
Oh, yeah.
everybody thinks it's in D.C.
Right.
No, the Pentagon's actually in Virginia, and who is the commander now? D.C. and the Capitol Police, United States Capitol Police, were in charge on that. The state police were there merely in support.
But are they
were-
in the same communication channels?
Oh yeah,
Are they-
yeah.
That's all.
That's
all.
something that actually came as a result of 9/11. They realized that the communication systems have to be improved. The other thing that came from 9/11 was the Fusion Center, and I want to give a shout out to the Fusion Center because when we served together, at least I did not know anything about the Fusion Center, and I'll first admit. And but 8 years ago, when I was appointed to this position, I became very well aware of the Fusion Center. And what the Fusion Center is embedded in the Virginia State Police, the state troopers, but they're assigned intelligence. And so they gather intelligence and disseminate intelligence. Right. So again, as a result of 9/11, the FBI had information, New York police had information, wasn't being shared. And then when the tragedy occurred, was the fire department on the same channels?
Right.
And
the Fusion Center brings all of the information together.
Fusion Center
figures it out.
collects intelligence, disseminates intelligence. So they get intelligence from the Richmond Police and move it around, or they get it from the Department of Homeland Security and move it down to the local police. So it's two ways. And they were just terrific with respect to Charlottesville. They shared all of that information with us. We shared it with the city of Charlottesville, how many people were coming, what kind of groups were coming. And so the intelligence is extremely important. And sometimes it's not that good.
I should feel badly about voting against that.
What's that?
I should feel badly about voting against it.
You voted against it? I can't believe you. Funding the Fusion Center?
I don't remember what it was. I think I was upset with the patron for something else. And who was the lady who had the Virginia Press Association? She goes, "Thank you for voting against that." I was like, "I did? I didn't know it. What did I vote against?" She goes, "The Fusion Center." I was like, "Oh yeah, I just saw the patron. I think it was more about the patron than it was the actual bill." I was like, in one of those moods,
I'm sure in the budget you had a second opportunity and you voted for the budget
Strong
because the
support of
Republicans were in charge, and so you voted for the budget.
I don't think it was a Republican bill though. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, the Fusion Center, state police, They do a great job.
Good.
And it was a tremendous resource for decision making on our part, be able to, what kind of resources are we going to need from the state? And again, the state, most people don't understand how that all works, but I don't blame them, because you figure, it's the governor's in charge.
Right.
But the state, particularly in the state police, they're there in support. They supplement the local. If there's something happening in the city of Richmond, state police are not primary. They support RPD. The Richmond police are in charge. We're there in support, and that's the case for most of any emergencies there are. Certainly was in Charlottesville and others that we've dealt with over the last 8 years. But we have the resources, fortunately, because some legislators do vote for the state police budget, and they have resources, TAC teams.
Right.
They have the training, they have the equipment.
All important stuff to have done at a time.
Big time. I mean, you can't expect, Stanton to have a TAC team ready for, a large demonstration at the Stonewall Jackson Hotel, though they have renamed that formally
known as.
But no, and that's where they call. The Stanton police will call state police and say, can you give us a TAC team? And the TAC team isn't on the streets. What they typically do is they're in a local library or school or something out of sight. But in case something happens,
response time. What do we?
Well, obviously you need significant time to get them in place.
So you have to have the intel ahead of time to make the call, that kind of stuff. Let's talk about, if we can, the decision making of law enforcement and your policy making years. I mean, because things have changed. When we had in the chair this morning, a delegate, Kim Taylor, who's it's her first year in, and she's trying to get used to the place. And if you were to talk to a freshman on the other first year on the other side of the aisle, about after your 20 years of public service, like, this is what I've learned in the decision-making process, and it actually being implemented, and what you should pay attention to, and how these things get done for the public good.
Yeah, well, we should actually sit down and write a book. I mean, write a book about that. I was it has to do something with your personality. I was the youngest of 7 kids, so I grew up learning to, speak when I'm asked,
right,
and when I know something that can add to the conversation. So what I typically in the day would tell freshmen, be seen and not heard.
Right.
Be a sponge, absorb everything you can.
Right.
Particularly with your committees, you'll receive anywhere between 3 to 5 committee assignments. Really focus on the issues that come before your committee. Try to become an expert. I'm not sure that any longer. That is not now the belief of many freshmen. I think that's
What are you saying? I mean,
what are you saying?
No,
I think you disagree. Yeah,
well,
that's not
my observation is that because the media has changed so much, and
we didn't have social media.
How they communicate with their constituents is so vastly different.
Yeah.
We don't go home with a report card and say, "Hey, I got an A and got all these things done for you," and they go, "Oh, you got an A." Send you right back up there. You have to be constantly communicating on all these different media channels, messages that really don't comport with what you're doing in committee, because people really don't care about HB 123. No. They care about the larger issue that's going on, I don't want to say globally, but politically globally, the macro view of what's talking about on cable news, and relating it then to the issues of the day in Virginia. Is that fair as a description of what's going on?
I think that's pretty accurate. There's a lot of talent. It's not about talent. It's not
about the underlying conditions politically.
They're sharp folks, both as freshmen and senior members. And, there's the whole partisanship too. Chris, you and I got along very well. I mean, we tangled over charter school vouchers. I think you always put in the school voucher bill and
tax credits.
Tax credits. And of course,
I believe in freedom. I'm a freedom guy.
I believe in public education, and that money would come out of public education. It would, we can argue that to this day, but we did it in a way. I mean, we used to laugh about it. We'd be on the floor. I know. The partisanship and maybe cable news.
We still made our points. We didn't laugh
folks,
it off.
The folks watch MSNBC, folks watch Fox, and there's just doesn't seem to be any common ground. And that's really unfortunate. I built some great relationships over time with Republicans, and certainly my Democratic
and
friends.
you were the minority leader on the floor.
Right, and I used to have to throw some bombs at you all.
Yeah.
But I think you all, that was my role.
Yeah.
And I felt strongly. I mean, I still, I still feel strongly philosophically about some of those issues. But I don't know if that's. I mean, I haven't. From my perspective as secretary, there were some issues that are just strictly partisan votes, and so I don't know. I'm concerned that has become so partisan, and it's unfortunate because the experience down here can be very beneficial trying to work with the other side of the aisle, both for Republicans and Democrats. So hopefully that'll prevail. I mean, the dynamics you have right now is you're going to have to, right? I mean, you have a Democratic Senate and you have a Republican House. So, maybe that will force, the last 2 years we've had Democratic control from the governor on throughout, and you haven't had to, wherever. You could pass a bill with 55 Democratic votes and 21 Democratic Senate, and the governor's going to sign it. But now, they're going to be forced to compromise on some of these issues because you're not going to get it through the Democratic Senate and vice versa. You're not going to get it through.
Well,
the Republican House.
You've done this a while. Your brother was a congressman. You've seen a lot. You've been exposed to a lot politically. Executive branch, legislative branch. A former colleague of yours, David Toscano, talked about the separation of powers relative to emergency orders. Where does this all come into play? What's the balance? And I guess the question I'm getting to is, how do we fix what's wrong with this system that seems to be dysfunctional yet is functional? Because you guys are still doing your job at public safety, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it just noise? And at the end of the day, because of the separation of powers, we are able to still have a functioning democracy, essentially?
Yeah, I think a lot of good things are happening. I mean, I think we've financially, we're coming out of the pandemic strong. We have more money now than we've ever had. I mean, we secured $84 million for correctional officer salaries, secured $24 million for state police salaries. So again, I'm still public safety centric here.
Sure.
And law enforcement, deputy sheriff's pay. So, I mean, that's huge. So there are some really good things happening. And I think that's going to receive, bipartisan support.
Without question. I mean, no one's going to vote against, increases in those. That's a tough vote.
Some voted against the Fusion Center, though, apparently. I would have thought that was
crazy days.
But
years and years
ago.
So
again, you find common ground. Now, around those issues, I think there's some, you're going to have the chair of House Appropriations agree with the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, I would think, around those issues. So that's common ground.
The larger issues, especially when it comes to, we've seen a lot of criminal justice issues. There's been a sea change in how we viewed, returning citizens from the penitentiaries, getting the vote. There's been it has changed so much in just the last 10 years, and when you came in, there was a heavy prosecution era.
Yeah, the 90s.
The 90s were heavy, and I think the pendulum is swinging back. Mm-hmm. It goes to the whole balance between the both parties and maybe society, but where do we find the balance in all of these things? Because right now there's some areas of the country that don't have the balance. We've seen some of the pictures from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Detroit, Baltimore. I mean, they're demilitarized zones. And we talk about the proximity to decision making and law enforcement presence being the cavalry. How do we find this balance so that we can have these safe areas in which to live? We don't have crime, and it's a problem.
Well, I did navigate through that. I mean, clearly there are differences of opinion with respect to parole issues in Virginia. We should have parole. We shouldn't have parole. How do you treat violent criminals? They should never get out of prison. Clearly there are differences of opinion on it, strong differences of opinion. What I found over my 8 years as secretary is that there is common ground around some of those issues. The recidivism rate, which is, if someone gets out, what is their likelihood of returning?
Right.
And if they return, that means they've committed another crime and probably another victim. Maybe it could be drugs or, but burglaries and violent crimes. so you have another victim. So we really found common ground around investing in reentry and rehabilitation efforts. We would go to the General Assembly, Democrat or Republican, and say, we need more drug clinics, or we need more career and technical education in our prisons so that they learn how to be an electrician.
Right.
And
did those programs work?
They do. We have the lowest recidivism rate in the nation. And I say that.
What's
it's about 23.4%. It is 23.4%, because this is something when we
you're not rounding up there.
No, well, it's just something that we've been so proud of, because we've been either first or second. I think South Carolina is a little lower right now, but there's 43 or 45 states that you want to compare apples to apples.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So about 43 or 45 states measure recidivism rate in the way Virginia does, and compared to those others, some states like Oklahoma had a 40% recidivism rate. That means 10 people you let out, 4 are going to be coming back, and that means there's victims. Serious crimes. They come back to a prison situation, and so felony. So that is something we were able to find common ground about. You could go to the hardest core conservative Republican and say, we want to reduce the number of victims. If this person receives mental health, there was a great example. The more mental health treatment a returning citizen received on the street through probation, the recidivism rate improved by 7%. I mean, they have the numbers,
Right.
DOC does a great job. And so we funded, and this was during McAuliffe's time, we funded additional, with the Republican legislature, we put money in for additional mental health counselors in probation offices. Again, that's middle ground. I mean, if we can address and make sure they stay on their medications, make sure they're properly diagnosed, they'll stay out of prison. They'll stay on the street.
Are they getting those services in prison?
Yes.
They do.
Yeah, and then, there's an innovative program too about, opioids and methadone, not methadone, but I can't think of the name of it now, but in trying to start them in prison just before they are released. Because anybody that comes up, either it's for parole or mandatory release, I mean, 95% of folks are going to get out of prison. Only 5% have those type of life sentences where they're never going to see the light of day. So it is imperative we try to provide them some, either it's mental health or substance abuse or career training. If they're young enough, they can get into careers at the age of 50 or 60 and come out and work and provide for their families. I mean, so that always was a part of middle ground, and that we have been successful with. And so, that again, you got to try to find the common ground. And
what's the selling point for Republicans in that space who want to be tough on crime and don't want to be seen as weaker on crime?
95% of our prison population is going to return to your communities, our Virginia communities.
Right.
Isn't it? Don't you want them to come back prepared to be a law-abiding citizen, a successful citizen? You do not want any more victims. You don't want these individuals coming to your community and committing more crime. And the Republicans
are. So it's an anti-crime.
And the Republican, there's a whole, there's a Republican crowd that really believes in that sort of. Ken Cuccinelli used to, and Bob McDonnell. Let me shout out our friend. We served with Bob. Bob actually hired Harold Clark in 2010.
Okay.
So he deserves a shout out here. He started it, and we doubled down with McAuliffe. We doubled down on the investments, and of course with Governor Northam. So we unfortunately I think we should have put more money into our correctional officers too during that time, and we are now, because staffing is terrible, and you can't have these programs without adequate staff, because they. Sometimes you have to bring folks in from the outside to come in for counseling, and that requires security. Sure. So when you have staffing shortages, it hurts your reentry programming. And so that, we really went to our Democratic friends and said, we're all into reentry, but without correctional officers, adequate number of correctional officers, you can't have this programming. And everybody bought off on this. Well, I shouldn't say that. The governor bought off on the salary increase. Hopefully the legislature will.
Right. So in your time, and you're trying to find the balance, the consensus, and I don't want to put a label on centrist, moderate, whatever it is, but you've had to deal with both sides, and you've done it for over 20 years successfully. Where can you honestly say that Republicans, if you would go back and close the door with your Democratic colleagues and say, look, Republicans do have a point here. This is legit. You've been a prosecutor, you've been a legislator, you've been in the executive branch, and look, folks, this is and I want to go conversely to Republicans. Look, the Democrats have a point here. How do you start cracking that shell with Republicans?
No, I do think there were Republican allies around that issue.
What about Democrats? Because there's Democrats going, look, we're not going to do what Republicans want to do here. In this field. When you say, look, folks, we're not doing these things like we should be doing. This is not going to work. You can have your talking points going back home and do all your social media stuff, but they kind of got a point here. And for public safety and the public good, you might want to pay attention to them on this. Do you have those?
Yeah, I think
you flesh those out.
There's been a lot of those agreements. The attention is around those issues that divide us, right?
Right.
That's certainly where cable news goes. Fox News is covering, one issue, and CNN covers another issue.
Different
totally
worlds. Different world.
You'd think everybody was fighting, but at the end of the day, the legislature. There's going to be speeches. There's going to be some bomb throwing. We used to throw, a few hand grenades at you guys just to, you have to keep you honest. You got to keep it lively. But at the end of the day, most issues do come. Look at all the bills that did pass over the last. You got bills passed. I got bills passed with Republicans.
Warner and Kane signed my bills.
Yeah. So you find it. I used to find a lot of common ground around drunk driving.
Let's go back to the question. What Democrats? Look, and I ask this question of a lot of candidates when I'm interviewing. Like, you got to admit, the other team does have a point here on X, Y, and Z. What is that point? They're kind of good on this.
Right.
Until we start admitting that, they got a point. Let's listen to them on this one and start changing the direction of the conversation, because without that, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to say, whoever wins the election gets up and gets what they want, and then you go back next time, the pendulum swings back, and there's no path forward, I don't think, in that constant back and forth.
Well, I think we'll see how that plays out with Governor Youngkin, right? We're living this in real time.
Right.
He won, and there were some issues where he certainly highlighted, education, freedom around mass, and that's come into play.
Right.
And so we'll see how all that comes out. Hopefully we're going to find some middle ground around education. I think teacher salaries. He talked about raising teacher salaries.
Oh yeah, the whole time.
And certainly that the Democrats have owned that issue for a long time, and there's now money. That's a wonderful thing, Chris.
Well,
when the budget and
it's
tax
not tight
cuts,
because so much money's been printed. Let's be honest. They've shoved so much money out into the economy.
I know.
That's where it comes from. They said, here we're going to spend all this money, and the states are flush with cash right now, and spending it wisely. Not on long term. We've lifted the floor on a lot of these things, essential workers, the public safety, et cetera. But if the largesse goes away, which it is likely to do as we recover from this, and it's not like they're right and we're wrong or vice versa. It's like, look, we have to manage our resources responsibly, because these good times, as you well know, we've been through recessions when it comes to we don't have a lot of money.
It's only a matter of time. This
Right.
happens. History will indicate there'll be, and that's why you want to make investments in your infrastructure now while interest rates are low and you have some money. Put it into roads and bridges, because in the tough times you don't have that kind of cash to do that. Put it into education. It pays dividends, right? And so, but even on the tax cuts, obviously the Republicans, less government,
Sure.
low taxes, that's their mantra. But I think there is.
Is that mantra changing though? I don't hear that as much. I don't hear. That was a growth out of the '90s in the Gingrich era and post-Soviet. And I hate to interrupt you because we were going in a direction. Because you said mantra, I'm like, but I don't hear that anymore.
Really?
As much. That was like credo.
Well, less regulations. And it's less government. Less. Environmental protection. Fewer regulations.
It's not a debate. It's an observation. I'm not.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong, and I've been married for over 30 years. I'm usually told every day how I am in fact wrong.
Well,
but in this case, I just don't hear that as much.
Well,
as
certainly
we used to.
tax cuts was something
That's like
Governor Youngkin mentioned, and that's
sure.
and I think there's some common ground around tax cuts. I mean, if you raise the standard deduction, it helps the middle class, the lower income earners, and the food tax. I mean, I thought we did eliminate the food tax back when I was in the legislature, but that was state. I know that was the state portion of it, because I remember having flyers on we eliminated the food tax. So they're going to have to work on.
Right.
That's a local. Kind of goes back to the car tax, right? Car tax was a local tax. The state now reimburses localities for the money they lost.
Right.
Is that how you want to do the food tax? I mean, the particulars and the details are going to have to get worked out. But there is common ground there, right? The food tax hurts those who are economically disadvantaged, which is typically the Democratic base, with lower income folks who you're trying to help, and so I do think there's some common ground that can be achieved around that standard deduction and the food tax cut. So you can get the liberals on board and the tax cutters on board, and that's a pretty strong coalition.
Those are tough no votes. That's a tough no vote.
Yeah.
So Brian Moran, former Secretary of Public Safety, 8 years, legislature for 13, 21 years total, public service. Top 3 lessons you would give someone looking at running for the House of Delegates or the state Senate or serving in state government. What would you say? This is what I've learned. This is what I would like to pass on to you. Please do X, Y, and Z.
The first one is be respectful of everyone. Let me just share a little story, a little anecdote. Governor Youngkin, I had never met him before. I saw him at the UVA game, and he had a crowd around him, so I wasn't gonna,
UVA Tech game.
UVA Tech game.
Football game.
Which Tech won, yeah.
Didn't go well.
So go Hokies. So, but I saw him. We were walking in the hall, and I saw him. I said, "Congratulations, Governor. Nice to meet you. Congratulations on the Secretary of Public Safety." I introduced myself. I didn't know if he knew any me, and he said, "Oh no, I know who you are." We looked at the list before we came, which told me, "Wow, the guy's looking at the list of who's coming to the president's box." And then he says, "Oh yeah, well, my wife recognized your name." I said, "Okay," and she said, "Yeah, she told the story that you two were standing at a poll 10 years ago, and she thought you were delightful. You were a gentleman. Of course, you were in the blue, and she was in the red.
Right.
And you were delightful. So he had a positive impression of me, which obviously, so I it's just kind of anecdotal. You always are respectful. I had no idea. This nice woman who's at a polling place.
And you have no recollection.
No, and she's going to turn out to be the first lady of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
You never know.
So you never know. And I shared that with my kids, and that's life. You should always be respectful of everyone. And I would underscore that in bold with the legislature.
Right.
Somebody like you, we've been friends ever since we served together.
Yep.
Be respectful. Sure. I mean, and it can be tough because even your friend. It's worse when you're friends. I mean, how many times did it happen to you? I'm sure it happened to me. I'd had a bill on the floor, and a Democratic colleague would get up and speak against it or vote against it, and you're like, "That's crushing." I'm like, "What are you doing?"
To your bill.
To my bill, yeah,
right.
To my bill. So be respectful of others. Be patient, tolerant.
So be respectful. What else?
Very respectful. Well, do your homework.
Do your homework.
As your legislator, I mean, you got to do your homework. Don't go in spouting off things that, try to get the facts as much as possible. Because you'll be found out pretty quickly if you don't know, what your bill does, or you don't know, So do your homework, and that's you should. And I don't. Those are two.
Okay.
Third, I don't know. The third to me would be, stay, at home. Be mindful of the time you're spending away from home.
Okay.
Your spouse, your family.
The balance, work-life
balance.
Yeah, that's
that's not bad off the top of my head. Those three.
That's not bad. let's end up on some lighter notes. So what are your favorite TV shows? What do you watch?
Oh my gosh, TV has really improved since we've been around. I mean, I remember as a kid watching Adam 12 and the Flintstones. Now you can go on
Adam
Netflix.
12, a public safety guy.
But I guess I was public safety all along.
Emergency 51 too, right?
Hill Street Blues
Okay.
was a good
Let's
one.
be safe out there. Boston.
Yeah, let's be safe out there. But today you can watch just tremendous television. I mean, and you can binge it without ads. Oh, so I watched. Oddly enough, I watched The Witcher last night. Have you seen The Witcher? It's on Netflix. I watched Condor.
Okay.
2 seasons of Condor. CIA agent.
You're binging right now.
I'm binging. Ozark.
Okay, you like that one?
Ozark's good. Have you seen Ozark?
I saw like part of the first season. Yeah, it's good.
I find that good, and that goes to show you drugs are indeed very dangerous. I know there's a war on drugs, but
those first couple of scenes, my wife's like, "We're not watching this."
We got to be balanced too. I mean, drug cartels. They're a very real thing. Drug cartels.
One time I watched those when she goes and sees the in-laws, and I'm like, "Oh, I get to watch my shows now."
Well, that's
just too violent for her.
That's exactly how Karen is. That she does not like the violence.
What books? What do you do? What are your favorite books?
Oh, while I was secretary, I really just got into fiction.
Okay.
I love Stephen King.
Okay.
I had never read Stephen King, and I went back and started reading Stephen King novels and really enjoyed his fiction. I like Baldacci.
Okay.
Baldacci's a Virginian. I enjoy
yeah.
giving him my money. So I enjoyed. Now I'm going to start. My daughter got me some fun books. I like Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell. I thought his books are very thought-provoking.
Very interesting.
So I'll start doing some more nonfiction now that I
You're
don't
getting
have
ready to branch
out.
During
the day, the last thing I want,
this is reality.
with the emergencies going on, the last thing I want is, oh my God, I got to think, at night and the emergencies.
You didn't turn your brain off.
Now I can binge on, fun television shows.
Favorite movies?
I haven't seen a movie in ages. I haven't gone to the movie theater.
Okay, what are your favorite old movies from the old ones?
We just got through the holiday season. The number one movie is It's a Wonderful Life.
Perfect.
George Bailey, what a great show. Donna Reed.
Fantastic.
But I like some, I like the science fiction. I like Star Trek and those sorts of movies. Yeah.
All right.
Why are you?
This is how I open the conversation with a lot of people, just to get to know them and just like start formulating.
Star Wars, Star Trek, and my son.
There's no crossover so far.
I'll tell you, Chris,
because they have so many interests.
My son was born May 1st, and it always coincided with some of the Marvel movies coming out.
Okay.
Iron Man, Spider-Man.
Okay.
Thor, and so would take him, and his friends would have those birthday parties, as you know, and take him to the movie theater. And this one particular movie, Chris, I guess it was Captain America, and it was an Iron Man movie. And I dressed up as Iron Man. And my buddy dressed up as Captain America. And he had a convertible. So, we wanted to surprise the kids. So, my wife had all the kids at the movie theater. How long ago was this? It must have been, it was before, he must have been 5 or 6, maybe. But 7.
You're in the House?
I was in the House of Delegates.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was in the House of Delegates. So we drive down Duke Street, which is a main thoroughfare in the city of Alexandria, and people are looking at, Iron Man with his mask and Captain America, and they're hooting and hollering at us, and it was May, so it was a beautiful day, and we get to the movie theater, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, we're celebrities. I could barely see out of my mask. I'm looking at these eyes. I couldn't see my feet. So all these kids start running up. And I couldn't see the kids, so I'm like tripping over the kids. And people were lining up to take pictures with us in the lobby. We're trying to make it to the theater to say hi to my son. And we couldn't get into the theater. And at one point, my wife comes over to me, and a woman starts yelling at her, "Wait in line. The line starts back there." And Karen's like, "I'm his wife. I'm trying to get him into the theater." It was the craziest thing. So I've always been partial to those Marvel movies, and
that's great.
And they always, again, coincided with my son's birthday, and I think he actually went. I think another one came out just this year, and it was Spider-Man. I think just came out, and he said it was terrific. I haven't seen it yet though. So. But anyway, I hope that
it's a good bonding moment with your kids there. Lastly, where do you get your media sources? Where do you turn for information?
I get the VPAP clips every morning and read through those clips religiously. I enjoy that, and then that's really A variety. I mean, I read everything that comes up on my iPhone.
Okay. Well, great.
I mean, there's some the slanting of stories just
so
drives
bad,
me crazy.
So bad.
It really does just drive me crazy. I mean, in both,
Yeah. No, you don't have to. I get it. I mean,
Yeah.
we've done this long enough to know.
Just give me the news. Would you?
Right. Just give me the facts.
I don't know if I have to go to the BBC,
Right.
English news, British the news to actually get the objective story. But
it's sad.
even if something like as important as the Ukraine right now, where's a trusted source of what is actually going on with Putin and Russia and Ukraine? But I mean, that is a challenge, and I don't know what the answer is because social media is here to stay. Facebooks, the Twitters. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I mean, the First Amendment,
But you admit that there's a problem to be solved.
Well, I don't think there's any question. One of the television shows I love is Homeland.
Yeah.
I was in season 7.
Oh, there you go.
1 second.
Little plug.
And they did.
It wasn't shameless.
Season 6 was all about disinformation, a Russian disinformation impact on an election, and I mean that's a very serious threat when they can. And we've seen that in the in the 2016, 2020. I mean, you folks who you think are trying to influence opinion through social media, not your next door neighbors or the guy down the street here. It's Russian counterintelligence, and that's very serious. And of course, cyber threats.
What was the stats from the 2016 election? For every one negative meme or post that was up on social media, 8 were coming from outside the country.
Yeah,
it's insane.
That is insane, and you worry just how much that is influencing our internal politics.
Well, public safety. I mean, safety from all the external foes that we have. But Brian, we'll catch up on those another time. It's been great having you on the VIP podcast. It says it right there. Yeah, so it makes you a VIP, even though you're no longer...
I'm a has-been, man. I'm a has-been.
You were.
And I'm happy about it.
I know you are. You're extremely happy about it. Great to have you on the show today. Appreciate you coming on.
Good to be with you.
Thanks.